23. So let me go to Matthew 4 first. We'll take them out of chronological order, because I think intuitively the first makes more sense, because you go, yeah, I got it. It belongs here. Jesus was down at the Jericho ford where John the Baptist was baptizing, and received water baptism there. And immediately after that, then Jesus, first chapter, Matthew 4:1, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came to him and said, if you're the Son of God, which, by the way, the Father had just said from heaven, this is my beloved Son with whom I'm well pleased. I mean, we're just verses away from that. Now Satan calls it into question. If you are really God's Son, tell these stones to become bread. And Jesus answered, it's written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Did you hear that? That's the same language we just read from Deuteronomy. The very purpose statement of being in wilderness, Satan says, let's subvert that purpose and let's see what you can do. And Jesus quotes back the very purpose for being in wilderness, to learn that to count on every word that comes from the mouth of God. What I find so striking about this, and helpful to me, I hope you find it helpful as well, is that Matthew seems to be intentionally recounting this story to remind us of Israel's extended stay in the wilderness. There's a number of points of continuity that are demonstrated in this really short storytelling event that takes me right back to the wilderness and lets me see Jesus in relationship to Israel in wilderness. Jesus was led by the Spirit. Israel did not go into wilderness of their own volition, but we read in the Old Testament, God led them into the wilderness. Pillar of fire during the night, pillar of cloud during the day. He is the one who's controlling direction and movement. He is the one who led them into wilderness. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Same ecosystem, not the same place. I heard some folks asking, is this where Israel was in wilderness for these extended stay? That's going to be south of here in the wilderness of Sinai. But the general ecosystem, the idea that you are out here on your own without food, water, and companionship, that is fundamental to wilderness, the wilderness experience of Israel. So the same ecosystem, to be tempted by the devil. So what was the temptation? The temptation is this: are you going to trust me when you don't see the fundamentals for survival in view? Will you trust me? I mean, it's one thing to trust in Egypt, where the fundamentals for survival are always in view. It's one thing to trust me out by the Jordan River, where you've got all of this attention devolving on you with the Holy Spirit descending in the form of the dove and the Father's voice sounding from heaven. You have everything you need. But what about here? Will you trust me when what it means to survive isn't in view? That's the test, right? That's the temptation. How long? 40 days and 40 nights. Israel, 40 years, right? So we almost march right down the row here. It's a food temptation, right? Wilderness food temptation. People complained about the food. It's almost phrase by phrase, not even sentence by sentence, but it's almost phrase by phrase that we see that our attention is called back into wilderness. And I can't help but come to the conclusion that Matthew is telling the story in this way so that we see Jesus entered exactly the same scenario as Israel in wilderness, and where they struggled and failed repeatedly, he succeeded. And that's a really powerful piece of theology. It's said beautifully in other places, that he came to live the life that I could not, the obedience that I owed the Father and couldn't give him, he provided. He was tested in every way we are, and yet didn't sin, Hebrews. The writer to the Hebrews says. And yet here is Jesus taking that theological idea of substitutionary atonement, of saying, I will go into your place and deliver the life to the Father that you can't. Here we see it in action. He puts himself in exactly the same circumstances Israel was, faces the same test, and where God's people of the past struggled and failed, he succeeds in their behalf. And that's a wonderful life illustration of what Jesus does for each of us. He goes to those places where we struggle. You know, I'll say it this way. If Jesus is just a good role model for me, and that's all he is for me, I just feel so frustrated because I never get there where he is, right? But he does more than just point the way towards healthy lifestyle. He actually goes and delivers it on my behalf. And this is one of those texts that demonstrates it. He is able to do what I can't do. He was able to do what Israel could not do. And that's the reason I think Matthew tells the story in the way he does, to make sure that we see Jesus is capable of answering the question better than I often do. Will you trust me out here when the fundamentals for survival aren't in view?